I'm Paul Levinson, and welcome to Light On, Light Through, episode 340, a roundtable discussion of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Well, Captain Phil convened a roundtable last night. I guess he went out and bought a round table. No, he invited 5 people to join him in a discussion of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Marybeth Ritkouski, Michael Rizzo, Roy Bjellquist, Colleen, Bement, and me. And we talked for about 2 hours and had a lot of fun, and there were a lot of different viewpoints about that series and about Star Trek in general. So, without further ado, here is our conversation.
Space. The final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
Hello.
Hello, Captain Phil.
Welcome to the WUSB Stony Brook, guys. I just played you into the theme to Strange New Worlds. So let's go. Here's what we're going to do tonight. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on some background music. Okay. So there we go. There's a little background music. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. My guests are Paul Levinson, Colleen, Bement, Michael Rizzo, Marybeth Ritkouski, and hopefully at some point, Roy Bjellquist. Has Roy shown up yet, Marybeth?
Not yet.
All right, so he's still on his little thing there. We're going to start off and give out our credits first. So I'm going to start with Colleen and just give us your links and what you do, and you know, in terms of like where people can find you. I know you still do Nerd Alert News, Colleen, stuff like that. So we're going to go around the room and do that. So go ahead, Colleen. Tell us about.
Thanks, Phil.
Your
Thanks
Strange
for
New
having
World.
me on.
A pleasure.
So, yeah, I'm Colleen. I am the editor of Nerd Alert News, and you can find us at nerdalertnews.net. And we are just a hotspot of all things nerdy and pop culture. We have celebrity interviews, movie reviews, book reviews. We have some convention coverage, just whatever pops up. And we are definitely Trek fans. And I really appreciate you having me on so we can talk about Strange New Worlds.
Paul Levinson, give us your credits, my friend.
Well, first of all, great to be here. I wear a whole bunch of hats because I don't have too much hair. As a science fiction writer, my 2 best-known novels are The Silk Code and The Plot to Save Socrates. I'm currently turning one of my short stories, It's Real Life, into a novel, and it's being made into a radio play. My nonfiction books have sold more than my science fiction books. I don't know what that says about either one. And last but not least, because I like to talk so much, I'm also a professor of communication and media studies at Fordham University. And I will say I'm also a great advocate of space exploration. And one of the things which kindled my love of that was watching Star Trek back in the 1960s.
Fantastic. Michael Rizzo, give us your street creds, my man.
I don't know if how much street cred I have, but we run a weekly live broadcast called Sci-Fi Distilled, and I do it with Marybeth, my partner there, and we talk about anything science fiction, television, movies from the 80s, 90s to current, and that's our cred, I guess. So that, and the fact that we both volunteer at the Star Trek Original Series set tour in Ticonderoga, New York. So we are Star Trek fans through and through.
And you can go to those set tours by looking up StarTrekTours.com. I believe there is a captain on his way, Michael?
There is, yes. The captain, the one and only captain, Bill Shatner, will be there again in November. And Marybeth knows the exact dates because she knows that stuff.
And Marybeth, that's why we saved you for the last, so you can give your street creds now, my friend.
Yeah, so my street creds are I am the co-host with Rizzo of Sci-Fi Distilled, talking all things science and geeky and nerdy from the 80s, 90s, and right up to the current day. But I am also one of the many volunteers that works on events up at the Star Trek Set Tour. I am the event manager. If you email us, I'm the one you'll be talking to. And the Mr. William Shatner, the captain himself, will be joining us November 18 and 19. And yes, you can still get tickets for that at StarTrekTour.com.
Fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around the room briefly. We'll start with Colleen because Colleen's the newbie of this group. And Colleen, what we're going to do is we're just going to briefly talk about, in under 3 to 5 minutes, the things you love, about Strange New Worlds, or maybe there are things you don't love so much. So just give us like a basic outline of what it is about this show that has got your attention, and what do you think of it? So go ahead, Colleen, you're on the air.
Thanks, Captain Phil. Hey, I'm just going to call you Captain Phil because I like it so much better than Phil. Well, because you are my captain. So, Phil, Strange New Worlds, what I love about it is it's fresh. It's different. It's different than the other versions of Trek that we've had, and I enjoy them all. But Strange New Worlds is just it to me. It feels like it's taking me back to TOS, like the original series. I feel like I'm sucked back in time, except with it being new and just so well done. The effects, the writing, the actors are amazing. I got started kind of late on it. I didn't start it till like partway through August, and I blazed through it, and I was left craving more. It's just, and it's not just me. I talked to so many people that absolutely love the show. They say this is what the Star Trek, all these new Trek versions, it's what it should have been all along. Is that everyone is loving it that much. My readers love it, and everyone I talk to at conventions love it. I haven't talked to anyone who has any complaints about it, so I can't tell you anything I don't love about it. I love the acting. I love the stories. I have cried at least twice.
Wow.
Already.
Wow.
I mean, the show is so well done. That's my take. I'd love to hear all of your takes.
Well, we're going to go to Paul Evanson now. Paul, we had done the discussion on Star Trek Picard, and it wasn't one of my favorites, but that's where we came up with the idea where we really need to do one of these discussions for Strange New Worlds, which is something we've all have been basically enjoying. So, Paul, your take briefly in the vein of what Colleen has done.
Well, I agree with everything Colleen said. And as far as what you're doing with Star Trek, don't do one on Discovery because I'm not enjoying that at all. In fact, I stopped watching it. But I think Strange New Worlds is absolutely superb for a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, just the character of Pike is so historically pertinent to Star Trek, to everything that has happened in Star Trek, because obviously, a la the Menagerie, it was there at the very beginning, even before Kirk, and it was our first introduction to Spock, a slightly younger version, of course, also played by Leonard Nimoy. So the character of Christopher Pike, even if it was poorly played, would be of great interest. But I think that Anson Mount is a wonderful actor. I enjoyed his performance in, I forget the name of it, he did some kind of series about the first cross-continental train.
Hell on Wheels.
Yeah, Hell on Wheels, right. And I think he does a superb job in this. And here I'll say something which I know is going to outrage a lot of people. I think that this Christopher Pike character, is a little better than Picard and is right up there with Kirk. And we'll see how this series goes, but he's that powerful a character. So that's one of the reasons I love Strange New Worlds. Another reason, which is actually also about Pike, but it's a very specific thing, is it's a wonderful, dramatic plot feature to have someone who knows what his end will be and then struggle to live through that. I mean, I can't imagine being in a situation like that. And I think that the writing and again, the acting really brings that home. The other thing I really love about Strange New Worlds is Spock. I think this young Spock is doing a great job. I can easily believe him evolving into Leonard Nimoy's Spock. And arguably, Spock he might be the most important character in all of the Star Treks. He's certainly way, way high up there in the top 2 or 3. So that's a lot of good things about Strange New Worlds. And like Colleen, I have nothing bad to say about it. And believe me, I have bad things to say about other Star Treks, as I said about Discovery. So I'm not just some pushover who loves every Star Trek. I think Strange New Worlds, the first season, is a masterpiece, and I'm looking forward to the second season.
As we're going along here, I want to welcome Roy Bjellquist to the show. And you can unmute yourself, Roy. What we're doing right now is we're going through just a basic initial impressions on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. We're halfway down the list. We talked to Colleen, we talked to Paul. We're going to go to Rizzo now, then we'll go to Marybeth, then we'll go to you, Roy, okay? And so welcome to the air. Roy Bjellquist, Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi.
Thanks, Captain Phil. Welcome, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well.
All right, Rizzo, you're on the mic. How do you feel about the show? Is it a love fest for you too?
No, unfortunately, it is not a love fest for me. I don't love it. I don't dislike it. I like the show. I don't love it. This is what I would say to Kurtzman. I'd said, you're a poor marksman. You keep missing the target. I think I had high hopes for this, especially after, and we won't talk about Discovery and other ones, but I had high hopes. I love Anson Mount. I love Rebecca Romijn. I think the casting was well done. What bothers me about the show is why they have to keep messing with canon, and they seem to just do it randomly and without really any real need to do it. I think that's what bothers me. I'm an old crusty Star Trek original series, but I also am a fan of what I call the golden age of Star Trek, being TNG and DS9 and Voyager to some degree, much as I dislike that show. But what I find good about the show is I like the fact they got back to episodic, that we're not going to the story arcs across the season. I think that's a huge improvement. I liked Anson Mount as Pike. I think he's a great Pike. I don't know if he's rivaling Kirk, but we can discuss that some more. But I think where I have my issues with, and I think Ethan Peck does a great job as Spock. Is bringing in some of the TOS characters that I didn't think to. Nurse Chapel, for one. I don't have a problem with the actress, and I don't even have a problem with the actress, the way she plays, but it's not Nurse Chapel to me. I don't know where they came up with this character. It doesn't fit anything we've kind of established as Nurse Chapel. The other thing is Dr. Mabenga. I don't know. That does not fit the timeline at all of how he came from TOS and now how he's chief medical officer, but then he's like an internist on TOS. Again, timeline. So the only way I can make any sense of this is that they took a page from the comic books, and this is all multiverse. So this is a different universe than our TOS is the only way it even fits. Other niggles things I have are on the production design. I love the exterior of what they did with the Enterprise. I think that's great. I think it looks great. The interior, I think they kind of, again, missed the mark. It's too big. Captain Pike has this, I don't know what it is, like it's like the bridal suite at the Ritz or something with a fireplace. And I mean, it just doesn't fit as a spaceship. It's not working for me as far as the space that they use. I would think someone who is someone who is in the service and in a marine service, every little space on a ship is used. You don't have any wasted space like they do on the Enterprise. It's just this massive useless space of everywhere. So these are the little niggly things, but I don't want to trash it. I'm not trashing it completely because I think overall, I think it's the best one they've come out with so far. I think what I'd like to see them do is stop screwing around with canon and just come up with new shows. Like, for instance, we're going to talk about the Gorn, which is a very common big thread in this series. Why they needed to use and then retcon the Gorn instead of just coming up with a new species that we had never heard of, and then you could do whatever you want with it. But instead you took a really well-known and what kind of beloved, even though it was only the one episode of a species, and you kind of completely retconned it into something that it really wasn't. So this is what I don't understand, what's going on in the writer's room when they're coming up with this stuff. I don't know if they're just purposely just doing whatever they want because they want to. But overall, like I say, I think there's some great episodes in here. I think there's some really weak episodes. I'm looking forward to season 2. I really hope that they kind of maybe correct some of the stuff a little bit, and we'll see what they do. But I right now, I say I like it. I don't love it.
No, and absolutely, dissenting views are welcome. You know, it leads to discussion and illumination and infinite diversity and infinite combinations, of course. So, Marybeth, you're on deck.
Yeah, I think I have to say I agree with Rizzo as far as plot lines go. We've yet to go anywhere strange, and we've yet to go anywhere new. We are boldly going where we've already been before. We've been there. Not only are we going back to the Gorn, but we're going to the Gorn and the movie Alien all in one go.
Well, I was going to get to that.
We're going, yeah, exactly. And they also, this other episode, I was like, oh, finally something new. No, kids, it was Snowpiercer. They just reworked it. They're just reworking other plot lines, which is sad because it's an amazing show. They've got the cast blows my mind. There are some breakouts in that cast, including Melissa Navia, which I'm not sure how to say her name. People love her. She plays Erica Artegas. She's incredible. People love her. I love her.
Well, obviously, because you're also a Helms person for the Starship Enterprise.
I'm also Helmswomen Unite.
Yes. So, yes.
The cast is incredible. I love Rebecca Romaine. I love Anson Mount. I was lucky enough to meet Ethan when he came to the Star Trek set for work. They are absolutely incredible. They could do so much more with this. I just would like to see them. And you know, the really weird thing is, despite all my plot complaints, I still find myself like, yeah, if I was going to jump on a ship and go with a crew, I'd want to go with this crew. Like, I'd want to be working with these people. I like their camaraderie. I like the way they work together. I would want to hang out with them. I would want to work with them. And I look forward to the show every week, and I can't wait for season 2. But they've got to go somewhere new. We boldly go someplace we've never been before, kids. Not some other place some other screenwriter has already done.
I feel about it. You and Rizzo mentioned that on your Facebook review of Strange New Worlds, and I'm going to revisit that concept further down in the discussion as we move along here. It is 9:39. You are listening to WUSB Stony Brook. We are having a massive discussion about Star Trek Strange New Worlds on Friday Night Freeform with Captain Phil, Colleen Bement, Paul Levinson, Michael Rizzo, Marybeth Ritkouski, and now, signing in, the man himself, Commander Roy Bjellquist, who has chaired 2 of the last in person and possibly the greatest, at least on the East Coast, conventions for Space 1999. What's your take on Strange New Worlds, my friend?
Well, I'm going to have to agree with Mike to a point, and I'm going to have to agree with Marybeth to a point. So I'm going to flash back a little bit, not so much to talk about Discovery, but just to talk about them being introduced on Discovery. I won't even get into my feelings about Discovery, but when they introduced the characters on there and it progressed through that season, in the back of my mind, I was like, these guys are going to definitely get their show. I mean, it had to go in that direction because of the way everything was being set up, the stories around them, and then the fact that they showed the Enterprise and everything towards the end. And they actually, as Marybeth said, they had the camaraderie, they had the interaction. It just worked. They had that chemistry. And then flash forward, it felt like it took forever, but they finally got their own series. And it was we were waiting in anticipation, and it felt really good to wait for something that we were looking forward to. I mean, we're all classic Star Trek fans, Next Generation back in the day, looking forward to those episodes coming out. And then after Next Generation, for me personally, things started to change a bit. And again, not to go down that path, but with this series and the fact that it was not with the story arc, that it was going, you have to watch, one episode connects to another. It was great to have it to be episodic. And they actually seem like that they're having fun. They seem like they're a crew that's relating to each other. And it was just something to look forward to. In regards to what Mike was saying about the timelines and everything, and just little things like that, that's a question that it is mind-boggling, because it's like, why do they go in the direction that things that they don't have to change? I mean, one of my things that just I found disturbing was just what they did with the Gorn. I mean, in regards to that, we know what the whole episode of Arena is. We know how it started. We know the middle of it. We know how it turns out. We know how Kirk has that revelation that, that the Gorn were trying to protect themselves, and they felt that, the Federation was invaders. And now we've gone into a different direction. And then to bridge off of what Marybeth was saying too, there's so much opportunity where we could have different storylines, different characters that could be introduced, and it can be worked in with these characters as well. And season 2 in anticipation is something that, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I've been watching it. I mean, those episodes would, get dumped. When I say dumped, turned on, would be launched maybe like around midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And if I woke up, I was like streaming that right away. I was looking forward to it. I mean, it was something that it was fun to look forward to seeing a Star Trek show again, and something that, you want to watch. So, I mean, Anson Mount came up there, I think it was December of 2018. We had the opportunity to meet him up at the set tour. I mean, he came in from Canada. He had just finished filming Discovery. It was the last, the last episode of the second season. He was great with the fans. It was so cool to have the opportunity to meet somebody that was going to be in the series. And this was, even before we saw his performance. So with that was something that was extra special. And then again, Ethan was up there too. Ethan Peck, we got to meet him too. I think it was with for Trek Ticonderoga. Great guy, just as far as going around the fans and everything. And you could see that they were actually really eager and excited about it. They want care to be taken with this, and it's almost like they, they've only got their actors. I mean, at the end of the day, they've only got so much that they can do in regards to trying to have things directed. But they really seem to care. And I think that really comes out. And I'm just hoping that the powers that be, we've seen so much with all these different kinds of Star Trek incarnations, some of it great, some of it not so great. And I just only hope that, the powers that be actually go in the right direction and listen to the fans and respect the fans. And then not even so much even that too, but know what's going to be successful as far as Star Trek. I mean, they've kind of broken a few things. I mean, again, Marybeth made a comment too about aliens. I mean, or Alien. I mean, that was just like, wow. I mean, that was just a surprise. So hopefully with the second season, it's definitely going to be even better than the first. I mean, they've got a great chemistry with the actors. There's a lot of different stories that they've set up. And again, it's independent of each other. So I definitely, I would say for me personally, if you're doing a 1 to 10 scale, I would give it an 8.5.
All right, so we all have had our opening say, and I'm going to try to make it more of a discussion now and move it around a little bit. We're going to try to keep it coherent, because sometimes in the Zoom area, things get people step on each other. So we're going to just try to be heard. But yeah, I think we're all, this ain't our first rodeo. So I'm going to kick it off, and I'm gonna throw a concept out, and we can run with this or not. Marybeth and Michael on their brilliant show, Sci-Fi Distilled. When is that on? When is that show on again, Marybeth?
Live on Facebook Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. or catch us wherever you stream a podcast.
And the next episode is going to be
Highlander. There can be only one.
I was going to say how many Highlander shows will there be? One. So I caught the tail end of Marybeth and Michael Rizzo's distillery, Sci-Fi Distilled, on Facebook, and they do archive them. I believe I think Michael is turning into a podcast as well if you want to like play it in the car. Or you could just go on Sci-Fi Distilled on the Facebook and look at older episodes, and maybe they've discussed a favorite movie of yours and you want to listen to what their opinion was and go from there. But I caught the tail end of their Strange New Worlds discussion, and Michael and Marybeth are saying, we haven't seen a lot of Strange New Worlds. We need to go and visit Strange New Worlds. And my idea in this, and then we'll go around the circle here, is we have seen a lot of Strange New Worlds because the people on the actual ship are the Strange New Worlds. We're meeting, our chief engineer. We're getting acquainted with them. It's not the journey to the actual planets that's the point of the show. It's each other. We're learning about each other, and everyone is so different. This is a fully integrated show. This is something that in the 1960s would point out, would be like a groundbreaking thing. It's like there's a woman in second command. There's people of color in various positions, and all these things in the 60s were groundbreaking and unbelievable. Well, and now in the 21st century, thank God, that's more of a standard sort of thing. But we're still learning about these people. We're learning about Uhura. We're learning about Hemmer. We're learning about the different characters. So my concept is the Strange New World is each other. So I'm going to kick it. I'm going to go backwards. So I'm going to kick it to Marybeth first, and then I'll do Michael and Roy, and then Paul and Colleen. So does my idea have any validity, Marybeth?
I gotta roll that one around in my head a little bit. My knee-jerk reaction was actually no, because if you wanted, we've already met all of them before. We know all these characters already. So maybe we're learning different sides of them. Sure, I guess. Even the engineer who's the most exotic, we've met his race before on Enterprise. So there's nothing truly new. At least on Disco, there was Linus. I'd never seen, I don't even know what Linus is. And there's Saru. He's brand new. He's brand spanking new. I think your application would be more suited to Disco than to Strange New World.
And there's nothing I like about Disco. The show, not the music. Michael, destroy my argument.
Well, I understand. I think I know where you're going with it, Phil. And I think you can do both. I think you're right. I think Star Trek, as traditionally, has been about the journey of these characters as well as the journey of the ship. Yeah. But what I'm seeing, you're in the first season. So, as with most Star Treks, they always seem to struggle in the first season anyway. So they're trying to find their footing and where they are. I think Marybeth makes a good point, and this is again kind of where I think they tripped up, is bringing in characters that we already know. We've met Uhura before, we've met Nurse Chapel before, we've met M'Benga to some degree, and of course Pike because we've seen him. So what they really need to do is you can have character development and interactions with the crew, which I think we're seeing, but I think you can also pair that with an interesting storyline with something new and exciting and what's going to happen next, and not revisit stuff that, like she said, we've kind of already done. That's kind of, so I kind of 50-50 on your argument. I think I do agree. I think Disco is doing this far more than Strange New World, as far as Disco seems all about the characters. And certainly they don't seem to put much thought into the storyline.
I will circle back to disco. We're talking about Star Trek Discovery, by the way. When we say disco, we're not talking about the Bee Gees, okay? But I will circle back to Star Trek Discovery in a few. But I want to go around the horn a little bit. So let's do Roy, and and then Paul, and then Colleen. So Roy, any ideas on my thought process here?
I understand your thought process, but to me, Strange New Worlds.
You're the only one, Roy.
In the title, it's. I'm sorry, Phil. It's just that to me, Strange New Worlds means exactly that. It's what's out there. I mean, it's so vast. I mean, we're talking about the galaxy, and that's to me what Star Trek is about. And even going back to the original series. When Kirk is, William Shatner's delivering the line, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. I mean, that gives me chills just saying those lines because of the way Shatner delivered it, because it's such a powerful statement. And it's pretty much about what is out there and their contact, it's their mission. So yes, I understand your perception of that and how it could be with the development, of us learning about the characters a little bit more about the backstory, because we're seeing these characters almost as junior officers with some of them, before they actually were in the Enterprise that, we know from the 1960s. But I think that the drive and the motivation behind the series is really about their exploration. So that's pretty much my stance on that.
I forgot where I was going to go next, but I think it was Paul. Paul, were you next?
Yes, you thought right. So let me say I agree, Phil, with what your thinking is, but actually that leads me to say what I was going to say before you shared your theory with us, which is that I disagree with Michael, Marybeth, and Roy. Diametrically differ with them. And here's why. Look, Strange New Worlds is taking place years before the original series. So in the original series, to take just one of the examples that Michael was talking about, we learned something about this species, the Gorn. We don't know how they got there. We don't know what they were like. We don't know how many slightly different varieties of the species that there are, how many planets they may not inhabit in the time from which they're now in Strange New Worlds, that time until the time that Kirk meets them. So I think that Strange New Worlds is entitled to take liberties with the TOS descriptions. And I think, in fact, that makes the story more exciting and even more believable. It would be rather stultifying if any time there was any kind of running into a TOS canon, either Strange New World stayed away from that, which is what Michael seems to be suggesting, or even worse, just presented exactly the same portrait as we see all those years later with TOS. And, you can look at the characters and say the same thing. We don't know what happened to M'Benga in between those two series. And Michael would be right if somehow M'Benga, the same exact M'Benga, were like a 10-year-old child in TOS, because then that wouldn't make any sense. But changing the nature of the character, and even Uhura, I found it very interesting, because what Strange New Worlds did with that character, because I'm interested in how that character, who is different from the Uhura of the original series, how A got to be. I think that's a very interesting question. There's no doubt that the Uhura of TOS is certainly wiser, more relaxed. I mean, a very different character. But what people do we know who, over a period of time, whatever their character might be, don't in some noticeable ways change their character? So all of that is to say, I like Strange New Worlds, as I've said. And part of why I like it is precisely because it does take on some of these beloved characters or hated characters or whatever they are from the 1960s series.
Colleen.
Wow, I think you and I are definitely going to agree on this one. I see what you guys are saying about, needing new stories and needing it to be fresh. I get that. I do. I might be alone on this, but I feel this certain amount of comfort of knowing these characters that I knew them in 1965 when they came on, or 64, whenever they were on. I got to know them then, and now I'm getting to know them now and diving deeper into them. I love that there's a familiarity for me that I kind of already know them. Like, I do already know the Gorn, and I love how they made him sound so scary in that episode. To me, I know this might be kind of silly, but I feel like it's like how R2-D2 knew how to fly, and then he forgot. Then he forgot how to fly in episode 4, right? So I kind of just let that go and embrace it and enjoy the nuances that I'm learning about these characters.
R2-D2 could fly?
So, yeah, right? When R2 knew how to fly, and then he totally forgot, and he can just roll, right? So, and going back to these characters, these same characters, and we learn something new about them. I think that's just part of redoing a show, like J.J. Abrams redid Trek. Some people hated it, some people loved it. I actually liked it. I know it was like an alt-universe thing, so I kind of accepted it as that, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Like, I love TOS. I love it. I love it for what it was, and I love Strange New Worlds for embracing these characters and getting to know a different side of them. And on that, I do agree. I really hope season 2, we see some new worlds and some new storylines. I'm sure we will. And I'm looking forward to getting to know these characters even deeper. But for me, again, it's the familiarity with it and already knowing these characters and loving them and getting to know them more, or getting to know them better, if that makes sense.
Going back to my original concept, while everyone was talking, I think I found the appropriate comparison for what I'm saying, and that is in the level of character and the way the characters are being reinvented or at least, given more depth, is the difference between, and this is for the comic books only, not the movies, comic books only, the difference between Len Weins and Bernie Wrightson's Swamp Thing as compared to Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. This is only talking about the comic books. So if you know your Swamp Thing books, you know what I'm talking about. Because the original Swamp Thing comics was a man who merged with a swamp and was trying to become human again. And the Alan Moore books was a plant that thought it was a man. And that made that character just expound even more. And that's the same sort of vibe. I mean, okay, so no one's really a plant in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, or we haven't met them yet. But that's the sort of reveal that I'm getting. That's the vibe I'm getting when I'm learning about these characters, where I'm learning about Samuel Kirk, or I'm learning about Uhura, or Number One. And it's exciting. I'm going to go back to Colleen, and I want to briefly go around the room again and ask you what your favorite episode of season 1 Star Trek Strange New Worlds were. So I'm putting Colleen on the spot, and I have the Wikipedia page in front of me, so in case you forget the name of your favorite episode, I can look it up for you. But yeah, do you have a favorite episode, Colleen?
Thanks a lot, Phil. Really, make me go first on that, and I don't remember all the episode names, and I don't have any notes.
I have the list in front of me.
Thanks. Well, okay, so the episode that made me cry my eyes out is when the doctor had to let go of his daughter. I'm a mom. I've got a daughter, and watching that ripped my heart out.
Was that the Elysium Kingdom?
Elysium Kingdom.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That was super painful. And yet that's freaking good writing, right? It's just so well done that I cried so hard and really got attached to it. So I liked that episode and hated it at the same time. And the finale of season 1, I was like on the seat of my chair. I loved it, and of course I don't remember what that one was called either.
A Quality of Mercy, which is the sequel to A Balance of Terror, or the reimagining of A Balance of Terror. Yeah. Paul, favorite episode? We'll help you out with the story titles.
Yeah, I don't know any of the story titles, but I have to say, and I indicated this before, is every episode in which Pike is struggling with how to live his life, knowing what the end is going to be. And it reminds me in many ways of what Paul Muad'Dib goes through in Dune, when he can see the future, and he's, the love of his life is somebody who was taken over by, his enemies, and should he take her back, and what is he going to do? I think that's such an exquisite dilemma, and it's something that we human beings outside of science fiction don't in fact usually have. We don't know in that kind of specificity exactly how our life is going to end. And I therefore find that in a profound philosophic sense, a very, very riveting thing to watch unfold in a television series.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. Michael Rizzo, you're next in the hot seat.
Clearly the best episode, I think, was the last one, A Quality of Mercy. Right out of the gate, I mean, and this might be contradictory, you might say, to what I've said previously, where they kept going back to TOS stuff and kind of mucking about with it. But I thought the way they handled the Balance of Terror episode, basically the retelling of it from as if Pike was captain, to show what would happen if he actually survives, or I should say doesn't get injured. I thought they did that one very well. That was fit really well. I wish they had just kept the monster maroon that he was wearing as a monster maroon instead of rebranding it like they do with everything. But I've come to the conclusion that Paramount CBS has figured out nerds, and that every time they come up with a new comm badge, a new uniform, somebody's going to buy it. So it's like shooting nerds in a barrel. So they figure they just put a new one out there every time, and somebody's going to buy it because they have to cosplay it. So anyway, but that would be my absolute favorite one out of the series. There are some other good ones in there. I don't know, but we don't have that. We'll get around to that, I guess.
Marybeth.
Yeah, there's actually a number of standouts. I'm actually going to I'm going to call out two. I'm going to call out the one I just criticized for being Alien rewritten. It's All Those Who Wander. It's the reworking of the Gorn. I'm mad at the screenwriters for visiting another plot line, but I gotta give them credit. They brought the tension. Like, they brought the suspense. It was scary. Like, I was like, if you watch that one in the dark, you're like sitting there with the blanket. It was really good in that way. The other one I really liked that I want to shout out was the Serene Squall, only because I love Jesse James Keitel as Captain Angel. That character is pure fire, and I want to see more of that character.
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that. I just, I'm breaking the rules here. I'm going to jump in and comment. There's a scene in the Serene Squall where Pike has control of the other ship, and he's just flying it, and he just got it. 1 minute, they're arguing, and the next minute, Pike's got it, and he's flying with it. I just love that. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. Roy.
Yeah, Marybeth took it. The Serene Squirrel. I mean, it was very well done. That's a character that that they're going to revisit her. They're going to bring her back. I mean, it worked. That was a favorite. And then, of course, the last episode that we were just talking about, A Quality of Mercy. Just watching that in regards to it. I mean, it was, they took their care again with lining up the way they photographed that episode. I mean, when you compare it to Balance of Terror, but going beyond that as well, it was interesting to have a different perspective, that you would see what would happen, how the timeline would be
disruptive. And it's kind of a reminder how they always bring up, and it's been brought up in previous Trek, different series about the timeline. I mean, it was something that was kind of dealt upon in Deep Space Nine about, they said, the temporal police. And it's a reminder that unfortunately things are, destiny has been set, and it's we all have our glass door moments where in life where you could go one way or you could go another, and then you wonder if I had gone in a different direction, what would have been. And this is kind of like a reminder of that. But as a result of that, thinking that he's going to be able to save so many lives, then you find out it would even be worse if he did go through that door and he's reminded of it. So I think that not only was it a fine tribute to an original series episode, it's probably definitely ranks in the top 10, at least for me personally, and the care that they handled with it, but they also had a very good story surrounding it. They, the way they went about it. So those two I would have to say are my favorites.
Star Trek, It's a Wonderful Life, sort of, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm going to comment on this briefly, and then I'm going to give you my favorite episode. But Paul, you remember a new Twilight Zone story called A Profile in Silver, which dealt with the assassination of John F. Kennedy?
Yeah, J. Neil Schulman, who passed away just a few years ago, a libertarian and actually a friend of mine, even though I didn't agree with his libertarian philosophy. He wrote that back in the early 1980s.
And if you haven't seen it, it's a story about Kennedy's ancestor in the future travels back in time and saves Kennedy from being assassinated, which leads the world to the brink of nuclear war because he didn't die where he was supposed to die. And then spoiler alert, plug your ears, John F. Kennedy goes back and sacrifices himself so the world won't go into nuclear war, much the same sort of thing that's going on with Captain Pike here, right, Paul?
Yeah, exactly. And let me just throw in a superb episode in the Orville, which the third season on Hulu, which reminded me a lot of City on the Edge of Forever, because it had that same theme. A character, in this case, travels into the future, but needs to be rescued from that because that would distort all future history. And I'll say here, by the way, that I think the Orville in season 3 has become really, in many of its episodes, pretty much as good as some of the best Star Trek episodes. That's in contrast to the first 2 seasons, which also were enjoyable, but nowhere nearly that good.
The thing I find, I'm going to give my favorite episode in a minute, and you're all going to hate me when I say it. But talking about the Orville for a second, the thing I find, and it's just like a personal revelation to me, is that watching the Orville and being friends with the Long Island musician Rory Kelly made me realize that Star Trek The Next Generation to some people was what Star Trek, the original series, was to me when I was young and growing up. And that it had such a great and positive impact on them. My good friend Rory Kelly, who actually recited a poem that Data wrote about his cat on our cat show where Marybeth and I were cats. I'll send that episode to you if you ask me, no matter what Marybeth says. She was fantastic. Marybeth was like, she should have gotten an Emmy, or whatever they give out for radio. It was just fantastic. She's great as a cat. But Rory, had such love for the original Trek, and it gave her, the same thing with Seth MacFarlane. You watch the show and it's like such a love letter to that show. And I'm like, when I look at the show, I had already been, a Star Trek original series fan, and I didn't have the same impact. What did David Hartwell say about the age of science fiction, Paul? The age of science fiction is 8. Is that right?
Yeah, he said 8 to 12.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that has a lot of truth to it. So I think that's it was just nice to be able to acknowledge that those things exist, and it makes it more of a brother and sisterhood of enjoying something than it is like, this is mine, and if you don't like it, screw you, it's more of let's share what we love instead of let's fight over what we love. Speaking of fighting, here is my favorite episode. Everybody fasten your seatbelts. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I loved Spock Amok. I thought it was great. I loved it. I loved T'Pring. I love the fact that I got to see Vulcans who are engaged get into an argument. I loved the Freaky Friday body switch. I know I sound like a jackass when I'm saying this, but I loved it. I loved it so much. And the thing I love about it is I get to see, I only, from Ted Sturgeon's, Amok Time from the second season of Star Trek, he did such a great thing. He made us think about the Vulcans as if they were salmon. They had to spawn every 7 years. There's arranged marriages, and you think Spock has never known his bride to be. And I'm glad they ignored that, and that the two of them had a relationship prior to that. I love the fact that T'Pring, it is a matriarchy. I love the fact that T'Pring asked Spock to marry him, and Spock is not stupid. He says yes. She's a stunningly beautiful actress. I love the way that she's playing the parts. I love the third wheel of Nurse Chapel in the whole thing. But it makes me look at Amok Time with new eyes, because I watched T'Pring, in the original series. Here's a woman who hates Spock so much that she wants Spock to kill his captain and lose his commission. So we're at the beginning of the relationship where they love each other, and it's going to go, that's where that relationship ends, much like the story arc for Captain Pike, where we know he's going to end up in the chair and back on Talos 4 at the end of his life. With this relationship, we see the death of the relationship where she chooses the other one because she's not putting up with his BS anymore. I love it. I love it. I want to see how Spock ruins, or T'Pring ruins, this relationship. And I can't wait to see where this goes in the next couple of seasons. Anybody want to jump on that? You know what? Just jump in, because I'm. Anybody want to run with that, or you want to go on to something else?
Still, the one thing that really kind of doesn't really when in Amok Time, he shows a picture of T'Pring and she's like 12, which doesn't really fit with what's going on now, because why would he show a picture of her when she was 12 if he was having relations with her as an adult? And apparently they don't have to wait 7 years to mate, because they can do it whenever they want. If that's a niggle, that's fine. I don't necessarily, but and I don't think she hates him. I think she's just selfish and she wants what she wants out of the relationship and doesn't want to deal with him. Like she said, remember her line in the original series is, "You becoming a legend, and I decided I did not want to be married to a legend. Consort of a legend." Thank you. So I don't necessarily think that she hates him, but I think her logic is saying, this is the way I can get out of it. And yes, she's so cold in her logic that she doesn't really care that Captain Kirk
past cold. She's straight unethical. Yeah, she's straight unethical in her logic at that point.
So she's just thinking about herself. She's actually very selfish, which is an emotion.
She didn't care that she was about to screw over.
I don't really think it's hatred. I don't think she's doing it out of hatred. I think she's doing it out of self-interest.
I think she wants to inflict pain on him. Take away. I feel like it's a divorce, and that she's trying to take him for everything he's got.
That's what we got to find out, because right now they are solid. They are in love.
It's great, and I love it. But that's the thing, is there's storm clouds on the horizon, and it's alluded to in Spock Amok. And let's face it, Spock is probably the most written about character in all of Star Trek. So there's not a lot of wiggle room with him. I mean, he and these Vulcans have longer lifespans. So, but yeah, I love that. I loved it. I think it's a cool concept. I like to see where it goes, and I like the two of them together. They're really good together. I mean, I would watch a Lifetime holiday movie with those two together.
Okay, well, wait a second. I want to just say something about Nurse Chapel. I actually think Chapel and Spock are the better couple in Strange New Worlds. And that's in part also because we know a little bit about the future, not only of Spock, we know a lot about the future of Spock, but somewhat also the future of Chapel. And I think that a large part of what Strange New Worlds tried to do in this first season is suggest that Spock is torn between the two. And I think that's a very interesting thing about Spock as well. By the way, I just want to say one other thing about, dealing with, certain icons that we get from earlier series and, being annoyed about that or liking that. If you think about it, going back to TOS, bringing in something which was a pilot in which the character was originally played by Jeffrey Hunter, an original actor. And of course, Leonard Nimoy playing Spock is in that already, so is Chapel. I think was a pretty risque, dangerous thing to do way back in the 60s. And I think it worked brilliantly because it set up the whole Star Trek series back then, the original series, as something which was not in any way going to be like conventional television. As far as I know, in fact, no other series has ever done anything like that. Dare to bring in a pilot, make it an episode. I think Strange New Worlds is true to that two-part episode that Gene Roddenberry had the brilliance to put in way back in the 1960s.
To save money, too.
Can I just say,
yeah, we're going to jump in on that.
So let's see. All right, so who's going to go first, Rizzo or Roy?
Go ahead, let Roy go.
Yeah, Roy.
Yeah, I mean, the original pilot was set up with Jeffrey Hunter to play Captain Christopher Pike, and then what happened was, I mean, this is my understanding, and you guys, I mean, Marybeth, Mike, please jump in, and anybody else, obviously Colleen and Paul and Phil. But with that, it didn't sell for the reasons that we've heard and everything with the networks and everything. It was thought to be too cerebral, and then Gene Roddenberry was given the second opportunity. But William Shatner's character was right, exactly. It was the first time supposedly in television history that this had occurred, and they gave the go ahead for a second pilot, but the character of Captain Kirk was a totally different character than that of Captain Pike.
That's right.
Those were two totally separate characters, and things were reworked in regards to Spock. I mean, Spock in the cage. I mean, essentially, he did have emotion. I mean, even one thing is, even you caught him smiling a lot of times, and unfortunately, they did away with the number one character, and a lot of the kind of logical mind, the calculating mind, I'll say less emotion, not that she didn't have emotion, but those traits were imprinted on the Spock character, and that became, that's what Leonard Nimoy took on in regards to his character and Where No Man Has Gone Before. And then both him and William Shatner, the dynamics between the two were totally different. I mean, Leonard Nimoy was, I remember when he did, Star Trek Memories right after Star Trek II had come out, and he even talked about it. He said, Jeffrey Hunter was a wonderful actor, but their chemistry was entirely different than the chemistry that he had with William Shatner's, and totally different characters. So, not to respectfully, just to kind of clarify that, Paul.
No, I'm glad you did, because you're right. But still, on the Spock point that you just made, it's certainly possible for Spock at any time to smile. It's not that it's impossible for Spock to smile. It's always a question of whether his Vulcan side or his human side is in control. So the fact that the young Spock might smile in that two-part TOS special episode, that is not an inconsistency with the overall Spock character.
And
Rizzo?
To bridge off your...
I mean, I just going to point out with the cage, we remember that was a pilot that nobody saw except for the networks. That was never aired until many, 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 many years later in syndication, and maybe at conventions they showed it. So nobody really saw that. the number one character was eliminated because the network they didn't want to have a woman as a first officer. That wasn't going to fly. So again, Gene fought for Spock. They didn't want Spock either. They wanted to get rid of him too. Gene fought for Spock to be in there, and because Majel was still kind of with Gene Roddenberry at the time, she got the Chapel character. So that these were not really done so much as for production. They were done because there was behind the scenes politics going on with the show to some degree. And we always have to kind of put that into perspective that, I think people put Roddenberry onto this pedestal a lot of times. And he was just a producer trying to get his show made and make money. That's all his goal was, and yes, not to take any credit away from him, but that was the politics of getting the show made. So I think, what Roy's saying is 100% correct. It's just, I think the fact that the way the character's laid out, and you're right, you're totally right about Spock. We saw him smile many times in the original series. He'll grin here and there. Certainly in Where No Man Has Gone Before, he kind of, there's definitely a grin. So we knew that. And in fact, that actually translates right up to the motion picture, where he's decided he wants to purge all his emotion, and that's why he's going to Kolinahr, and then he senses V'ger, and we know that story goes. And then, of course, he dies, comes back, and now he's kind of more half and half again. So, that's all I really want to say of that. It's just that there's politics always going on, and so it's not always just the writing or that much thought into it. It's more like, how can we shoehorn this person back into a job?
Exactly.
Cool. You know what? I want to throw something out there, and we are talking with my good friends, Marybeth Ritkouski, Michael Rizzo, Roy Bjellquist, Paul Levinson, and Colleen Bement. Paul is in, I think Queens. Was it Queens, Paul?
No, it's White Plains, New
White
York.
Plains. Roy is in New Jersey, that strange alien landscape. Marybeth is up in Massachusetts. Rizzo is up in New Hampshire, and Colleen is in Denver, Colorado. How are things in Denver, Colorado, Colleen?
Way out here 2 hours earlier than all you guys.
So you're not sleepy at all, not like Rizzo. Rizzo's exhausted. I'm torturing him.
I'm hanging in there. It's fine.
Good.
Denver is awesome, you guys. Denver is having just amazing weather. No hurricanes, no nothing, no problems. Denver is just keeping it cool.
Awesome.
It's awesome out here. 2 hours earlier.
Like snow in June, though. We have another friend that lives out that way, and he was posting some pictures of some snow very late in the year. And
oh my gosh!
I don't know. I can't deal with that. Nope. Sorry. No.
So, but you guys, so it's not like snow out your way. When it snows in Denver, it melts the next day. And they make it sound so bad on the news, like it's this major blizzard. And then it melts the next day, and it's like 60. So yeah, living in Denver is pretty awesome.
My buddy Howard is texting us saying Roddenberry said he can only save only one character, number one or Spock, so he saved Spock. So he is listening. So Rizzo, favorite captain, Anson Mount? Yes, no, maybe. What do you think of the performance and the actual character?
Kirk will always be my favorite. There's the only one and only, especially after if you've ever met William Shatner, I think that would solidify if you were a fan. The man, he is an amazing man. But I've also met Anson, and I was very impressed with him. And like Paul was saying, I've seen him on Hell on Wheels. He's a great actor. He's a good captain. I mean, I like him as a character. My only niggle, I guess, with him on this is I'd like to see him be a little more captain-like, a little more officer-like with some of his crew. I think there's a little bit too much banter on the bridge during a crisis, a little too much back talk in a military type situation. It's like captain gives an order, you don't really question it, but I'm kind of seeing that a little bit on this. I know it's
just to jump in a second, this seems like a holdover from Discovery. There's a lot of that in Discovery. Just want to throw that in there.
It's the new Trek. So but Anson is great. Is he better than Picard? Probably not. Not yet. Not yet. I haven't seen that yet. And I'm telling you, and actually in the world of Star Trek as a whole, I think Picard is still actually probably more popular than Kirk is overall. And I think TNG is still CBS Paramount's flagship franchise with the new stuff excluded. TNG was still their biggest show. So I like Anson. I like Pike. They need to do something with his hair. So he doesn't look like the Paramount logo. But I think overall,
what's that cartoon character's name? Johnny
Bravo.
Johnny Bravo. Yeah, he's kind of got that. There was a good meme going on where somebody took the hair and really made it into the Paramount mountain.
Yep.
And it was, it really kind of, but it is a little too much. But you know what? Janeway had terrible hair in the first season of Voyager. It was awful. And they toned it down. So I think they'll get it eventually.
Marybeth?
Yeah, Rizzo's right. As of a couple of years ago, anyway, I don't know what the latest is, but as of a couple of years ago, the execs at CBS themselves told me that Star Trek: The Next Generation remains their number one show, their number one ship, and their number one captain, as you know, for the franchise.
Marybeth, when you say that, does that mean in terms of they're making the money?
To this day, makes the most money.
Yeah,
yes.
Because
Yes.
I imagine there are Star Trek fans in Paramount, but the bottom line is the dollar bills, y'all, right?
Well, yeah, it's a business, guys. It's show business. You got to remember the business side of show business. Yeah.
But
so
go ahead.
my favorite captain is Next Gen era Picard. Not so much the most recent Picard, but Next Gen era Picard. Do I think Pike can get there? He's a different character. It's as different as Picard and Kirk were. Picard and Pike are different too. It's apples and oranges. Pike's awesome for who he is, but he's not Picard.
And Anson Mount, you met him in person, the person?
Yeah.
the
Yes,
actor?
and we met Anson. He had just he just finished the filming Discovery. We hadn't seen it yet. We had no idea what was coming. If I had known how much I was going to enjoy Pike, I would have tried harder to appreciate him when he was standing right in front of me. But at the time, I just saw an exhausted man who was sitting down, literally with his head in his hands. He was so tired. He had just come from like 24 hours filming, came straight to the Star Trek set tour, and jumped right in with 2 feet to meet the fans there. He was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Exhausted, but incredible.
And Roy, you've met him as well?
Yeah, at the same time that Marybeth did. Like she was just saying, he was really beat. And he got on stage and he was telling his story. He was passing out cards to the fans. I think he had some kind of site or something. I don't remember. I have that card somewhere. But very engaging and everything. But in regards to your original question, I mean, William Shatner, or I should say in regards to the Captain Kirk is always going to be my favorite. And that's just because I grew up with Captain Kirk. In regards to Next Generation, I watched Next Generation from beginning to end. I mean, it was all over the internet just recently, posted about it. Star Trek: The Next Generation just celebrated the anniversary of its 35th anniversary, which just blows my mind away because it just reminds me of how old I am. But I remember all the anticipation and all the talk of as far as, how is this going to be? How dare they do this? There's only one Star Trek, and fast forward 35 years later, and look how many Star Treks there are. But in regards to that, yeah, I mean, I would have to say it's Kirk, and then Patrick Stewart with Captain Picard. Anson Mount is in the process of making Captain Pike his own. I mean, obviously with Jeffrey Hunter, he originated the role. He did it for literally a pilot. He did, maybe if we're lucky, an 80-minute episode.
What do you think? It was like a week's work for him as an actor, or 2 weeks work, back in the day?
Yeah, it probably was not even that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they shot it over before and after Thanksgiving of 1964, if my memory recurs, correctly. So you're talking literally 58 years ago. But I mean, I think he's on the way to making this his own. I like what he's doing. I like what the writers are doing with him. I mean, he's his own person. They're not trying to mimic anybody else. And I think that's going to be the success of this character. Could he potentially be better? I don't think he's ever going to be better. I don't even think it's fair to say better, because I think everyone has their own strengths, and it's more like, who do you appreciate, who do you favor? But as far as better, I don't know. I don't know if that's a fair term, especially at this point. But I really like what he's doing, and I think, if he stays on the path, I think it's going to be some good stuff down the road.
Colleen, what do you think of Anson Mount? I don't think you've met him in person, but what do you think of the performance of the actor Anson Mount, and where the actual character himself? You're obviously familiar with the original Captain Pike. So what are your thoughts?
So back to your original question, Mike. No, I haven't met him. That would be cool to meet him. And I did watch him on Hell on Wheels, and he was great. And I agree with the Paramount hair. Yeah, that was interesting. But what I want to say is, it's hard to compare and to pick one, because Kirk's the original. William Shatner, he's larger than life, and he always will be. Anson Mount, his character is. Pike's different. Like you guys had originally talked about. I'm not sure if he's quite taking his position that seriously. He's got a lot of humor. He's joking around with the crew a lot. He's really, really different. So and Kirk's always so serious and so Shakespearean, and like everything is just bigger than life with every sentence he says. I want to propose that. Who do you think that I'm going to go back with a question for you guys. Who do you think the showrunners are going after with Strange New Worlds? Because the two captains are so different. Do you think they're going after like a new audience, or are they trying to get us, the old audience, to like them? So like, are they going after, I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself right, but are they going after a new audience to get new viewers, or are they trying to please us older audience? Because they are such different characters.
Before we answer that question, which we were definitely going to answer, I want Paul's take on Anson Mount, and then Paul, once you're done talking about that, we'll go back around the room again and talk about what Colleen just asked. But go ahead, tell us about your thoughts on Captain Pike, and then answer Colleen's question.
All right, well, so first of all, I haven't met Anson Mount or William Shatner or any of the actors in Star Trek in person. I did meet John Lennon once in an elevator in the early 1970s. And I was telling him to come to a recording studio where I was recording one of my songs. He never showed up. It's okay. I still love him and his music.
Are you telling me... You telling me Lennon could have been on that first album that hit big in Japan?
Yeah, that's right. He could have been on Twice Upon a Rhyme if only he had showed up. But I think the studio was too far away. I met him in an elevator in a Manhattan building, some kind of record company.
Is this going to work? Is this going to work into that story you're working on with Pete Fornatel?
Well, no. I'll mention it. I'll talk. It's called It's Real Life. It's an alternate history story about the Beatles and about the late disc jockey Pete Fornatel. And it starts out with Pete in a world in which John Lennon was not assassinated. And but probably I wrote that story in part because meeting John Lennon like that, just very briefly, has never left me. But let me answer this question at hand. And I think, Phil, you've heard me talk about this before. And in fact, possibly Michael and Marybeth have heard me too, because we might have talked about this the last time we were together last year. I have something I call the first love syndrome. And what I mean by that is what people tend to love if there is a series in which there are various episodes and various incarnations. It's always the series that they were first exposed to. Doesn't matter even how old they are. And I realize this in a very profound way. I mean, it sounds like a bad joke, but at some point at a science fiction convention in the late 1990s, I ran into someone and we got into a discussion. It was like a panel about Star Trek back then. And I guess it was TOS, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. I don't think Voyager had started yet. And somebody in the audience raised his hand and said, well, what did you think about Star Trek, the motion picture? And I said, I thought it was horrible. And he said, are you really? And this guy, who's like a guy back then, like in his 20s, he was saying that, no, he loved it. And I said, are you kidding me? Have you never seen, the original series or Star Trek: The Next Generation? He said, yeah, I've seen both of them. And neither of them had like the grandeur of that movie. And I realized he had seen it in a theater, in contrast to seeing the other things on television. And he'd seen it when he was considerably younger. And that's what made an impression on him. So I think that all of us, no matter how much we might analyze this, we are to some extent caught up in this first love syndrome. So, as everyone here has said, how can you put anyone above Kirk? Because, that is so fundamental to us. But nonetheless, as I said earlier, I think Pike is beginning to give Kirk a run for his money. And to be honest with everyone here and everyone who's listening, although I loved The Next Generation, it was not because of Picard. It was because of Data and Worf and some of the other characters, even Riker. I thought Picard was good in The Next Generation, but he did not dominate the show. I think the strength of The Next Generation was truly an ensemble cast. And so for me, Pike has already...
As opposed to the Holy Trinity in the original Star Trek, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, right?
Yes, that's right. So I think Pike has already exceeded Picard. And it is unfortunate. I think maybe Marybeth, I think Marybeth made this point. It's hard now to think of Picard without thinking of the character we've seen in this new television series where, I think he's a great actor, but I just think the character, he's tired, indecisive, somewhat interesting, but nowhere near the level of Kirk or Pike.
Well, I'm gonna talk about Anson Mount for a second. I will answer Colleen's question, and then I'll give the rest of the people in the room a chance to answer Colleen's question. I do have to remind you that it is 10:45, and you are listening to Friday Night Freeform with Captain Phil and a panel of Star Trek fans talking about Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, and there will be more science fiction with my buddy Dr. Howard Margolin coming up at 11:30 tonight, and then Chris Phillips with the End of Radio as your official palate cleanser from the worlds of science fiction. So what I want to say about Anson Mount's performance, I did have the opportunity to meet him, and I did not take it. I kind of regret it now. I was not particularly happy with Anson's work in Star Trek Discovery, but I think that has more to do with the way the Discovery is shot, the way the story's played out. And I don't want to get into that because that's just a hole we're going to fall into and not get out of tonight. I could talk about that for hours, though. Yeah. What I do like about the character and the way Anson is playing him is the subtlety to it. There are gestures, there are facial expressions, there are looks that he's giving his crew that I really, really like. And I think he's not the operatic, type of character that's this larger than life that we've been talking about with Patrick Stewart's Picard or William Shatner's Captain Kirk. So I like the small moves. I like the fact that he likes to cook. I like that a lot. It shows difference there. I like the fact, sorry, Rizzo, I like the fact that he has a large room to be in. I think that for dramatic purposes, it gives the cast a place to work in, sort of like the rec room or the conference room in the original series. That's just a place, where they can bang their heads together and have some drama there, like 10 Forward was in the Star Trek: The Next Generation. I like these small moves. I like the fact that he has a girlfriend, and I love the hair. It's the future. People could do whatever they want with their hair, and since they have replicators, he could probably have Marge Simpson hair if he wants to, So yeah. In terms of the greatest captain, everybody knows the greatest captain of them all is Captain Phil, alternate Thursdays on WUSB Stony Brook. That truly is the greatest captain. I'm pretty sure everybody in the room here agrees with me, and if they don't, I'll knock them off the air. No, my favorite captain. It wasn't a captain at all. It was Commodore Decker in Star Trek, the original series, The Doomsday Machine. Don't you understand? We've got to destroy it. So I love that. And Paul, to go back to the age you were seeing it, I remember sitting in my bedroom at the edge of my bed, looking at a black and white TV, while the Enterprise was being sucked into the Doomsday Machine, and Scotty said, "Phasers? You need phasers? I got one bank recharge." And that was it. My heart flew out of my chest and went to the Enterprise after that, or the Constellation. So we had the answer to Colleen's question. Oh, yes, and who is the show being made for? So for Colleen, and then we'll go around the room. I think Colleen, he's going for the hat trick. I think he's going to please all the fans. I think he's trying to reach the classic audience who is on, was starting to leave the planet. They're starting to leave, and I think he's also going for a new audience. I believe Discovery did get a new audience. I don't understand that audience, but you know what? I'm not gonna denigrate anybody who loves something. Love is love, and if you love Discovery, that's great. Have a hat at it. I have no problem with that. I don't get it, but you know what? There's a lot of things in this world I don't get. So I think they're going for everybody, and being informed by what Marybeth said about Next Gen. Maybe that's where they're going. They're going to create as big an audience because Next Gen probably got the new audience and the classic audience. I don't think there's a lot of classic fans who completely despise Star Trek: The Next Generation. I think they like it, some love it, most tolerate it. I don't think there's that many people who hate it. So, yeah. So, to answer Colleen's question, let's go to Michael Rizzo. Who is he making the show for, Michael?
I tend to quote Sterling Archer, a little column A, a little column B. It's I think they're trying to shotgun it and hit. They're trying to pull in new viewers, probably pulling a punch over from Discovery for certainly, and they're trying to do a fan service to us TOS fans. That's where I think they're slipping, is that the way they're going about it. They tried it in Discovery and it was terrible. Any fan service they did, they just totally mucked it up. But I think they're trying with this one, and that's why I think they brought in the Gorn, and they brought in some of the old TOS characters to try to pull some of us thinking over. But I still think he's missing the mark a little bit. It wasn't quite there. I think it could have been done a little better. That's just my opinion. But just wanted to jump quickly back to what Paul was saying about First Loves. That is absolutely 100% correct. Whatever people watched and fell in love with first is always going to be their favorite, because I ran into this at Trek Condoroga, which is our little Star Trek event we run once a year up there at the set tour. I give what I call a Star Trek round. I call it Roundtable. It's me talking and people asking questions, but and I usually ask, "What's your favorite Star Trek?" Because we get and there was a girl there that said Voyager, which after I was done with the bile in the back of my throat, I realized that was the first Star Trek that she was exposed to. She was never exposed to anything else but Voyager, so that was her center point. So I have to respect that. Like you said, if that's what you love, great, go with it. I don't like it. That's my prerogative. I'll tell you, I'm an oddball when it comes to the old school, because I love TOS is always going to be my favorite. But my second favorite, and this is going to get some eye rolls, is Enterprise. I honestly think that's my second favorite, and I don't necessarily think it's anybody else's, and it should be, but I think it was a very underrated show. And then DS9 would actually be my third. TNG comes in at 4 for me.
What?
So
wow.
TNG, I call it goody two shoes Trek, because they always did the right thing. They always did the right thing in the end. They never went against the rules. It was always did the right thing. So
Marybeth.
So yes. So
go ahead. Finish up, Rizzo. Go ahead.
No, that's it. I was just say I think they are trying to hit both. I don't necessarily think they're doing it effectively, but I think they're trying to get as many broad viewership on this one as opposed to, like you say, Discovery, which has a very specific, clearly they're after a very specific demographic.
Marybeth?
Yeah, they're not making it for new viewers. They're making it for us, and we know this because they said as much. They said it. They said out loud, we heard you. The cry went up from people watching Disco who were not happy, and then people really, really, really enjoyed Pike on Disco. And the cry went up, and it was an ongoing drumbeat on Twitter for a while there. Just Pike needs a show, Pike needs a show, Pike needs a show. And they finally said, we hear you. We hear you. And they did it.
Roy? Who are they making the show for, Roy? Are they making it for you?
I was going to say, Phil, here you go. Space 1999, year 1 or year 2?
Well, the obvious answer to that, Roy, is Ring Around the Moon. It always will be Ring Around the Moon. It's always going to be Ring Around the Moon. And you can put me into an alternate timeline and it'll still be Ring Around the Moon. That's an inside joke for our space fans. Who are they making the show for?
Phil, well done.
There you go. I'm actually originally from Norway. Did you know that? That's another inside joke.
On the moon surface, dancing to Vic Elms.
Yeah, oh baby. So Roy, who is Akiva making the show for? Is it as we've said?
I would have to agree with Marybeth, just because I everything that was going on, like she said, I mean, it was all over the internet with regards to that. But to be fair, I mean, it's a business and everything, and it's they're trying to appeal, but they don't have to do what they did with this, because they can do whatever they want. It is a business, but after everything that's happened with, for example, I mean, and it's, I was going to say the Star Trek movies, but that's going in a different place. I mean, I'm personally not a fan of those, and we can talk about that another time. But in regards to the, Disco and the way it started out, I mean, the first half of that, I was not a fan of. And we were up in Ticonderoga watching those first 2 episodes because they were broadcasting for free. And it was a way to get fans, in, and, it was like Star Trek was coming back and everything. And then it just kind of went in the direction it went in. And then the second half of the first season, I kind of started to appreciate. And then the second season, of course, had Anson and, did everything that brought us to what we have now at Strange New Worlds. So if they really didn't care, I don't think they would have actually gone to do what they did. So I'm going to say definitely it's more for us to bring us in, to support it, and to hopefully capture our viewership. And knowing that it's a science fiction series, it is Star Trek, and there's going to be other people that are going to tune in just because they're curious. But it was to get our attention and to say, there is, like Marybeth said, we're listening to you, we're hearing it.
Very good. Very good. We're going to start wrapping up our discussion of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Paul Levinson, Michael Rizzo, Marybeth Ritkouski, Roy Bjellquist, and Colleen Bement. This has been a wonderful discussion. You've all been very well behaved. No one's arguing. This is definitely not like one of those. What are those things called, Paul? That you've done those MSNBC shows or those Fox News shows where you're like one of the talking heads in the boxes. How is this? How is this measured up to that sort of situation? Does everyone behave themselves here?
I'll tell you what I think. I like a disco. I like a boogie on the disco highway.
Getting late, folks. Getting late.
That's my last word on this.
Let's that was great. Let's start to wrap things up here. Final thoughts. So I'm going to give my final thoughts, and you guys start to gather your thoughts. I'll give you a heads up. I'm going to go to Colleen first once I'm done talking, and then I'm going to surprise everybody else. Go in some random order. So my final thoughts on Star Trek Strange New Worlds is it's the Star Trek I've been waiting for many, many years. It's the closest thing I've encountered so far that meets up with me watching Star Trek reruns in the 1970s with the UHF antenna and a black and white TV. Okay, so it's getting to that point where I'm feeling it. I love the visual cues. I love the fact that the opening credits reminds me of the Bantam Star Trek series books. There seems to be so many visual nods here and there. I love that. I strangely enough, have not fallen in love with the actual Enterprise. I think because it's a CG sort of thing, I feel disconnected from it a little bit. Whereas I love Star Trek the Motion Picture Enterprise because it was a real model. I love the original series Enterprise because it was a real model. And even though it was kind of hard, it wasn't as clear. Star Trek The Next Generation, the Enterprise D was a real model. So those ships seem to have a little more gravitas towards me when I look at it. I get that I want to be there feeling in my gut. I want to go there, what Liz Lemon says. But I'm not feeling that with this Enterprise because it's CG. I just watched the episode where the Enterprise is like using a black hole to escape the Gorn, and it's an amazing sequence of effects, and I love the sets and I love everything. I just don't have that feeling I get like just back from the 70s, and I think that's just because I'm an old man now. So it's getting there though. It's slow, but it's a really, really good show. I love the characters. I love the Spock and T'Pring relationship, and I want to see where it goes. I think I love all the actors, but Marybeth is still the best helmsperson. And always will be. Colleen, final words.
I think
All right.
Colleen wandered off. Oh, she's there. Okay.
No, Colleen left because the husband's home. So my final words.
Tell him you're busy. You're talking to Captain Phil.
Right?
That's a good
No.
reason to leave.
You're drafted.
I just had to shut the door. So my final words are what I love is, I'm just going to echo on what I said earlier. What I love the most about Strange New Worlds is that it makes me feel comfortable. It makes me feel like I'm back at home with the original series, which is what I grew up with. And the reason I asked that question that I asked about who do you think that the showrunners are going after? I mean, I really feel like they are going after us, the original series fans and the original Trek fans, because it just brings me back to the joy and the love that I had when I was a kid. And it was my first show. So it is what I fell in love with. And I feel like I just sit down and I turn it on and I feel like I'm home. I feel like I'm back home and it's what I love. And it's the best version of Trek, in my opinion, that I have seen in many, many years. And I'm enjoying every minute of it.
Awesome. So randomly, let's go to Roy.
I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to what's coming down the pike. I just hope that if they're going to continue to keep it on line with the original series, that they don't mess with canon. I mean, granted, there's different things that they can do and everything, but there's stuff that has already been established, and they're taking so much care with everything that they've done with gearing it towards the original series. It's just that there's so many outlets that they can go with. It's just don't disrupt the timeline. It's as simple as that. It's like follow their own rules in regards to that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what stories they're going to come up with and what it's going to lead to. And they can create other things that haven't been discussed prior, because I mean this is taking place before the adventures from the original series. So there's things that may not have been mentioned in the original series, and that's okay. But if they are going to have references to things that already occurred, just show it the respect that's needed. And kind of like what Colleen was just saying. I mean, it's fun to look forward to something that we enjoy, and I think that as long as they stay on course with everything, it's going to be a fun ride. So very, very positive, very optimistic. Is it ever going to be the original series? No. And there's a lot of comparisons with that, and I think that for anybody out there, if you like classic Star Trek, and you feel like you don't want to like this new show because it's something new that's unheard of. I mean, everybody's entitled to enjoy what they like, and it's not like blasphemous. So I think that just keep that in mind and just give it a chance. But it's I definitely I'm very positive about it.
Awesome. Michael Rizzo, your final thoughts on Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
I am I overall I enjoyed it. I think there's some places, as I said, that they missed the mark. Like Roy kind of said, screwing around with established canon. I think didn't need to happen. I just, that's my take on it. I like Pike, so I'm optimistically hopeful to see what we're going to see in season 2. We didn't even talk about Carol Kane filling in for the engineering position. Very bold choice. Don't know how that's going to work out. Can't really see her in Star Trek, but we'll see how that goes. I'll reserve any kind of judgment on that until I see it. My thing with CBS is, or Paramount is, I think what they need to do is look to what Favreau is doing with Star Wars on Disney, because I think they are kicking Star Trek's butt with their shows. And the reason I say that is, and I've said this before on our show, when you watch The Mandalorian, you watch The Book of Boba Fett, you watch Andor, you're watching a Star Wars show. They nailed the feel of Star Wars, no matter what planet they're on. It could be a planet we've never seen before. The other thing is when they're on Mos Eisley, it looks like Mos Eisley from 1977. You know what I'm saying? They didn't go and change it, and I think that's very important. They didn't change it. They kept the feel, which I don't think CBS is doing. They've completely rebuilt it, and I don't think said that they could modernize. I don't want to see 1967 Trek. But I would like to see some kind of a natural, kind of like what they did in TNG. Whenever they went back to TOS era, they copied it exactly. They didn't change it. That was exactly like it was on the show. So, that's what I'd like to see. But overall, I think it's good compared to what other stuff is, with the exception of Lower Decks, which is just phenomenal. That's another whole show. I would say it's the best thing they've put out so far.
I'm enjoying Lower Decks too. I agree. And Marybeth talked me off the ledge on that because I wanted to not like it, and Marybeth said, just give it a chance. And all right, so I had to listen to her because you just have to. Those are the rules. Speaking of Marybeth, final words. Besides everybody watch Lower Decks.
Everybody watch Lower Decks. You have to know Trek to it. You have to know Trek inside out and backwards.
It's made for the fans.
It's made for the fans. My final thought on Strange New Worlds is I was kind of wondering, because Colleen and Paul are not alone in their effusive love for the show. There's millions of fans out there who adore this show, and I was wondering, are Rizzo and Roy and I being overly sensitive to and it occurred to me that Rizzo and Roy and I have had the extraordinarily rare and unique privilege of walking through the Enterprise alone when it's quiet and there's only ship sounds and the lights and it's just you on the ship. And there's a certain reverence.
It's a religious experience.
I have been alone on the bridge, just standing there looking at the view screen, looking around at the lights, at the seats, and thinking about the people that sat in them. And it's extraordinarily, like I said, it's a unique privilege. And there's something about that. After you've had that experience, you don't like them messing your show that much. And I'm saying that because my first love, if I'm going to take Paul's theory, my first exposure was Next Gen. I'm a Next Gen girl. That's my first love. But I've been to the set tour. And there's something, I don't want to use the word sacred, but there's just something about it that you don't mess with it.
It's sacred to you and to a heck of a lot of other people. No, they'd never deny.
So that may be the reason why we're like, hey, don't be changing the Gorn and don't be doing things. That may be it. Maybe not. I don't know. But everyone come to the set tour and have that experience.
That was remarkably touching, and I'm so glad we included that in tonight's discussion. I like that a lot, and that is a unique experience. I've been to the set tours, and I have not had that experience because I was there with a tour. Although the people who were touring with me, the people who ran the tour, were incredibly generous with me, and I will forever be grateful to that. But yeah, Ticonderoga, New York, you'll want to try it out. Last word going to the professional science fiction writer Paul Levinson. Final words on Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I agree with Michael's point about the new Star Wars series. And actually, I thought the Obi-Wan Kenobi series was a masterpiece for the same reasons that Michael was saying for the other series, which I also thought were really superb. But the reason why I love Strange New Worlds so much is for the same reason why, after all is said and done, Star Trek The Next Generation didn't quite do it for me. And the reason that was the case was that there was so few references to Star Trek, the original series. Obviously, Next Generation took place somewhat in the future, but you could almost watch Next Generation and not know much of anything of some of these major things that happened in the original series. And, I missed that when I was watching it. And I've always wanted to see more of the original series. The movies did deliberately try to make that connection. In fact, there was one movie where, Kirk and Picard are in the same movie, right? They're in that sort of, crazy little bubble of a world. But that was like a little overdone, and it was like so out of context, it was hard to really appreciate that. So I think that is the foundation of why I love Strange New Worlds. As Phil, you said, and Colleen said, it's the first time I've ever been brought back to how I felt when I was watching TOS. And I believe those characters. And every time I see Pike, I can't help thinking of that wonderful episode, which winds up both tragically but beautifully with Pike totally disfigured on that planet. And obviously, it's just such a pleasure to see a younger Spock. After a while, it got boring to see the much older Spock, in the movies and so on. How many times can you replay the same old, situation, the same old story? In contrast, Strange New Worlds gives us this vibrant young character. I think Ethan Peck does it really wonderfully. So count me someone who's thrilled that Paramount Plus did this series. I hope it continues for many seasons. I'm sure it's going to make some mistakes. I'm not such a person who insists on everything being so totally accurate in terms of how does it measure up to this or that, in the overall franchise. But I understand that is an important thing. And again, just to repeat myself, I think that when you're dealing with two different series that take place in two different times, things can happen in those times which could explain differences between the earlier versions of these characters and the later versions of these characters.
Paul, as we close, and thank you so much, everyone, for coming on. Give us all the places on the internet where we can find your work and what you do, and of course this new hopeful radio series and maybe a Netflix series. We're fingers crossed about the parallel Pete Fornatel story.
Well, as I said, I'm very excited about this. It started as a short story. I mean, it's like a classic pandemic, story, meaning I wrote it during the lockdown, and I probably wouldn't have written it if it hadn't been. I started working on it a few years earlier, but it really didn't develop until I finally, wrote what it is now back in January 2022. The short story got a wonderful response. I've now expanded it into a novel, and someone is now trying to decide, should it be made into a movie or a limited television series. Apropos our whole discussion here, I'm pushing for a television series because I think they tend to have much more longevity. And totally separate from that, right now at this very moment, there's a radio play in production, and I'll give you this tease. It's going to have some live new performances of some Beatle numbers. So not, of course, by the Beatles themselves, but by people who sound, somewhat like them. So that's what I'm doing right now. Anyone who's interested in my books, just search on my name on Amazon. You'll find a whole load of my novels and short stories. If you're interested in my music, do the same on Spotify. You'll find my 2 albums, Twice Upon a Rhyme from 1972, Welcome Up, Songs of Space and Time from 2020. I'm sort of like the whole Star Trek evolution, right? One album is in 1972, the other is in 2020. So, and thanks a lot for this great conversation. I really enjoyed it immensely.
Yes, a pleasure. And Paul, we're gonna give everybody a copy of this afterwards. But Paul, you're gonna throw this into your what is it when I send you something, you take it and you put it out into the world?
That's right. I basically cut out anyone who disagrees with me. No, I'm only kidding. I have a podcast called Light On, Light Through. It's usually my reviews of various television series, occasional political commentary, interviews with people. But every time I do a show with Captain Phil, I take that show and put it on Light Through. So I'll send everyone the link to it as soon as Phil sends me the MP3 for this. I'll put it up on the podcast, and there it will live forever.
Forever. So, you'll never get rid of it. Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. Tell us all about that and what's coming up for you.
Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner is actually, we're into our 3rd year, started April of 2020. And you can watch us now on Facebook. It's on Friday nights, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And occasionally on Sundays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Usually once a month I'm doing those. And like I said, I broadcast on Facebook. Just in the last 2 weeks, I started to broadcast on YouTube as well as Twitter. So if you do a search on it, you can find the show listed there. We just did the 1973 film Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, discussing that. That was the one with Kim Darby, which is a cult classic. Ironically enough, that came out around October 10th of 73.
Starring Miri.
Celebrating. Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of actors and actresses, and even the director of that movie, John Newland, who, Captain Phil, you did the first episode when we talked about Alcoa Presents One Step Beyond. That was his show. And he directed that. He directed classic Star Trek series Errand of Mercy, the introduction to the Klingons, and then of course you had Kim Darby, and then you also had Barbara Anderson that were in that movie as well too, and Felix Silva. Yep, he was in The Cage. He's one of the Telosians, and he's actually one of the we'll say one of the gnomes in this film. So That's the latest.
Yeah,
in
he
regards to that.
a very memorable part. He was the best gnome. I've never known a better gnome. God. Michael Rizzo, tell us all about the Sci-Fi Distilled, the distillery, and what you do.
Well, we cover sci-fi from the 80s, 90s to current, all the way up to the current stuff. We tend to not do really current stuff, although we have on occasion. We did cover Strange New Worlds. We tend to like to do things that are complete. But we are on 7 o'clock on Facebook Eastern Time on Wednesdays. So you can catch us this week. We're coming up. We're going to do the Highlander. We're going to have a kind of a panel discussion, and there'll be only one when we're done. So that's the basis of our show. We cover all kinds of topics, like I said, from television to film, from all over that era.
And Marybeth, tell us all about the Star Trek tours, StarTrekTour.com, and tell everyone what a great helms person you are for the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah, once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away, I did get to fly the ship in a fan film. You can find that, I guess, if you search hard enough on YouTube. No, the Star Trek Set Tour is really excited to be hosting none other than William Shatner coming up here November 18 and 19. Tickets for that and for all of our exciting events are available at StarTrekTour.com. You can add us on Twitter, or you can just check out our website. You can find us on Facebook. We're everywhere you want to be.
And finally, Colleen, tell us about Nerd Alert News and the cool stuff that is going on in your hometown, Denver, Colorado.
So Nerd Alert News can be found at nerdalertnews.net. And yes, of course, we are everywhere too. We're on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, you name it. But we're a blog. So we're the old-fashioned written word. And what we do is just pop culture, sci-fi, gaming. I have writers from all around the world that contribute their articles. So it isn't just me. That's what makes it so interesting is I've got so many different points of views from different artists from around the world. And what we really enjoy is one of the main things that we do is interview celebrities. And I have interviewed William Shatner, and that was quite an experience because I was super intimidated and I'd heard horror stories about what he is like in an interview. And he was actually, thank God, he was very kind and wonderful. So you can also see his interview on my site, as well as a bunch of different celebrity interviews from TV, movies, and comic artists, you name it. So again, go to nerdalertnews.net, and it's the old-fashioned way of doing it. You're going to have to actually read. And thanks again, Captain Phil, for having us on.
And thanks for being patient. We were originally going to do this in August, and the new schedule for WUSB got released, and things changed up a little bit here and there. But we made it work, and I'm glad we did. I absolutely enjoyed this immensely. And we spent the better half of 2 hours talking about Star Trek. Thank you so much, guys. It's been incredible, and I'll see you on Earth Prime. Take care, everybody.
Thank
Great
you.
discussion. Live long and prosper.
Night.
Everybody.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that roundtable discussion of Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. By the way, I should mention that Captain Phil is a disc jockey on WUSB Radio, and that's where the conversation that you just heard took place. I'll, of course, be reviewing episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, as well as Picard and lots of other Star Trek things in the months and years ahead, right here on this podcast. And before then, lots of other good science fiction, mystery on television. All kinds of good things are popping these days. So stay tuned for reviews. There'll be other interviews, all kinds of developments in this podcast. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sound, and keep doing whatever you can to help those brave people of Ukraine fight off what that demented Russian leader Putin is trying to do to Ukraine and to the world.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
Athens, 2042 AD. She ripped the paper in half, then ripped the halves, then ripped what was left again into bits and pieces of history that could have been. Sierra Waters had read once that, years ago, it was thought that men made love for the thrill, while women made love for the sense of connection it gave them.
Curled Up with a Good Book says, Sierra Waters is sexy as hell. You can find out more about The Plot to Save Socrates by Paul Levinson at theplottosavesocrates.com.
Paul Levinson Silk Code about an ancient biotech war raging on in secret for centuries.